I graduated believing I had finally earned my place in the family business. Instead, I opened a folder and learned my parents had already handed everything to my sister. I didn't find out during a meeting. No announcement, no conversation, just a thin, gray folder tucked into a cabinet I'd opened 100 times before. When I asked my mother why my name wasn't there, she didn't hesitate. She didn't soften it. She said I was useful with my hands, not my brain. That was the moment years of unpaid 60-hour weeks finally made sense. And it was the moment I stopped giving them my labor. That choice triggered a phone call from my father about our biggest client. And nothing was the same after that. Before I tell you how it unfolded, pause for a second. Please subscribe to the channel and hit the bell icon so you never miss a moment like this. Your like and share can carry this story to someone who needs hope, healing, or strength today. Red Heart. My name is Renee Calder, and in my family, worth was measured in hours worked, not names on paperwork. Our fabrication shop sat just outside a crowded Arizona industrial strip, sand-colored buildings, dust in the air, heat that clung to everything by mid-morning. From the outside, people called it a successful family operation. Inside, it ran on an unspoken hierarchy that never needed to be explained because everyone already knew their place. My father talked about legacy. He said it while walking clients past framed project photos, his hand resting proudly on finished pieces. My mother talked about presentation, how things looked, how they landed, what story they told. Between them, the future was always discussed as if it already belonged to someone else. That someone was my younger sister, Paige. Paige never smelled like metal or oil. She showed up polished, perfect hair, tailored clothes, phone always ready. When clients visited, she floated through the space, smiling, talking vision, never touching the work itself. My parents watched her like she was proof they'd done something right. When they looked at me, it was different. I was already assigned. I learned early not to argue. As a teenager, my weekends weren't trips or rest. They were sanding, packing, fixing what no one else wanted to deal with. I learned how to lift things heavier than I should have been lifting. My hands cracked every winter. The skin never fully healed. My parents called it responsibility. I called it survival. When I finished college, I thought things might change. I came back with systems knowledge, logistics, workflow planning, ways to prevent breakdowns before they happened. I imagined sitting at the table instead of standing at the bench. Nothing changed. I worked harder, longer days, nights that blurred into mornings. 60-hour weeks weren't rare. They were expected. Payment was always delayed, always explained away. It's for the business, my father said. It'll come back to you, my mother promised. I wanted to believe them. I needed to. What hurt wasn't the work. It was the silence around it. When projects succeeded, Paige's name came up. When problems surfaced, they landed on my desk without discussion. Once, my mother watched me load raw material into my truck and said, almost gently, "You're lucky you're so good with your hands." She meant it as reassurance. I heard it as a ceiling. Still, I stayed, because when you grow up being useful instead of chosen, you learn to confuse endurance with love. I didn't realize how carefully my role had already been decided. The shift wasn't loud. It was subtle. Meetings started happening without me. Conversations paused when I walked in, then resumed later behind closed doors. Supplier decisions were suddenly already made. Client calls I used to handle went unanswered until Paige looped herself in and replied with polished messages that sounded impressive without actually saying much. Meanwhile, my workload increased. I fixed rushed orders, corrected mistakes before clients saw them, reworked schedules when materials arrived late, stayed after hours when something didn't come out right. Some nights my hands hurt so badly, I had to sit in my truck with the engine running before I could drive home. Pay was always coming. Paige showed up midday, sometimes, with a photographer, sometimes just her phone. She'd walk through the shop like it was a stage, snap a few photos, then disappear. Later, I'd see the posts, captions about craftsmanship, people praising her vision. My parents shared every one. Once, I proposed a change to fix a recurring delay. I laid it out carefully. My father nodded and said we'd think about it. 2 months later, Paige presented nearly the same idea as part of a branding pitch. Applause. That's when something tightened inside me. Not anger yet, clarity. This wasn't about effort. It was about roles. And mine was fixed. The night everything broke open, the shop was unusually quiet. Most of the crew had left early. I stayed behind to grab paperwork my father had asked for, insurance-related. I knew where he kept things. When I pulled open the drawer, folders shifted. One stood out, neatly labeled, internal planning. I told myself not to look. I looked anyway. Ownership transfer timelines, role designations, strategy phases, Paige's name everywhere. Mine appeared once, under a section labeled restructuring, transition phase out. I read it again, slower. They hadn't forgotten me. They had planned around me. I closed the folder and put it back exactly where it was. The room felt smaller. The hum of the lights too loud. That was the moment I understood something I'd been avoiding for years. I wasn't being overlooked. I was being replaced. I didn't confront them. I went home and lay awake replaying every conversation, every just help a little longer, every promise that never materialized. The next morning, I went back like nothing had changed. Same jeans, same apron, but inside, the belief that effort would earn recognition was gone. And without that belief, everything changed. I stopped staying late. Quietly, no announcement. When my shift ended, I cleaned my station and left. If an issue came up after hours, I documented it instead of fixing it. If a delivery stalled, I forwarded details instead of absorbing the damage myself. I didn't sabotage anything. I just stopped protecting a system built on my silence. At first, no one noticed. Then the cracks appeared. At first, the changes were so small they were easy to dismiss. A supplier called asking about a tolerance detail I usually handled. I forwarded the message to the office instead of answering it myself. A client emailed with technical questions. I replied politely and looped in management rather than fixing it quietly like I always had. Meetings started running long. Decisions stalled. People waited. The hardest part wasn't watching the cracks form. It was resisting the instinct to rush in and seal them. I'd been trained to absorb pressure, to smooth things over before anyone else felt discomfort. Letting problems sit felt wrong, almost reckless. But I reminded myself of the folder. Outside the shop, something unexpected happened. A supplier I'd worked with for nearly 8 years pulled me aside during a routine pickup. He didn't accuse or pry. He just asked casually if I planned on staying long-term. I hesitated. He nodded like he already knew. "Whatever you decide," he said, "you're the reason this place runs." A few days later, an email came in from a long-standing client. Short, direct, thanking me for a recent rush job and asking, almost as an afterthought, if I'd ever consider working independently. I didn't answer, but I saved it. The real collapse came on a Friday afternoon. I was loading my truck when my phone rang. My father's name lit up the screen. He rarely called me directly during work hours. His voice, when I answered, was tight, controlled, but strained. "We've got a situation," he said. "Our largest account has concerns." Largest wasn't an exaggeration. That Client represented nearly a third of our annual revenue. Contracts renewed every 18 months, worth more than $2 million over the last cycle alone. What kind of concerns? I asked. He hesitated. They're asking questions. Technical ones. They're not comfortable moving forward without reassurance. I looked back at the shop, the open bay doors, the familiar noise, the place that had taken everything from me, while promising nothing in return. I'll get back to you, I said, and for the first time, I meant it. I didn't call him right away. I sat in my truck with the engine off, hands resting on the steering wheel, watching dust drift through the open doors. For years, that sound, the low hum of machines, had felt like home. Now it felt like a place I'd already left. When I finally returned the call, I kept my voice even. I've uploaded all documentation. I said, everything's in the shared system. A pause. Then quieter. They specifically asked for you. There it was. They don't want files, he continued. They want the person they trust. I told him we'd talk later, and ended the call before he could push further. That evening was our regular family dinner. Same house, same polished table reflecting warm overhead lights. Normally, I arrived early to help. That night, I arrived exactly on time. My mother was arranging dishes. She glanced up, smiled briefly, then adjusted a napkin that didn't need adjusting. Paige arrived moments later, flawless as always, phone already in her hand. My father followed with a bottle of wine, acting like nothing was wrong. We sat. Small talk filled the space. Paige mentioned a post that had performed well. My mother nodded approvingly. My father commented on traffic. It felt rehearsed, like a scene practiced without me. I reached into my bag and placed a slim folder in the center of the table. No one touched it. What's that? My father asked. You know what it is, I said. My mother's hand stilled. Paige glanced at the folder, then back to her phone. I opened it and slid the page I'd memorized toward them. I found this by accident, I said, but it explains a lot. My father leaned forward, reading. His jaw tightened. My mother didn't look at the page. She looked at me. This was internal planning, she said calmly. You weren't meant to see it yet. Yet, I repeated. So there was a timeline where you planned to tell me I was being phased out. Paige finally spoke, tone light, dismissive. You're overreacting. It's just structure. Structure that gives you everything, I said, turning to her, and gives me nothing. My father opened his mouth, then closed it. My mother sighed, the sound heavy with practiced disappointment. Renee, you've always been good with your hands. That's your strength. But leadership requires a different kind of mind. There it was, not softened, not hidden, good with my hands, not my brain. Instead of pain, I felt relief. The last illusion shattered cleanly. So all those years, I said slowly, the unpaid weeks, the projects I carried, the problems I solved, none of that mattered. It mattered, my father said quickly. Of course it did. But not enough to count, I replied. Silence settled over the table. Then my father's phone buzzed. He glanced at it, frowned, and stood. I need to take this. He stepped away. I watched his shoulders tense, watched the color drain from his face as he listened. When he returned, the wine forgotten on the counter, he looked smaller. It's the client, he said. They're not comfortable proceeding. Paige scoffed. They're bluffing. They're not. My father snapped, then caught himself. He turned to me. They're asking for you. They said if you're not involved, they're reconsidering. I met his eyes. Everything they need is documented. They don't want documents, he said. They want you. My mother frowned. What does that mean? It means, I said calmly, the relationship was with me, not the brand, not the image. Paige laughed sharply. That's ridiculous. They work with who delivers. I said, who answers calls at night? Who fixes things before they explode? My father rubbed his forehead. Renee, we need you to step in. Just this once. The irony almost made me smile. And I asked, after I fix this, do I go back to being phased out? We can revisit things, he said weakly. My mother leaned forward. You're being selfish. This affects all of us. No, I said quietly. This affects the system you built. Another buzz. My father checked his phone again. His hand shook. They're pulling out, he said, effective immediately. Paige stood abruptly. That's impossible. They sent notice, he replied. They're done. The room felt smaller, heavier. You could stop this, my father said, looking at me like he was seeing me clearly for the first time. And too late. I shook my head. No, I couldn't. Not anymore. Silence stretched between us. I'm not doing this to punish you, I said. I'm doing it because I finally understand my place. And it's not here. The days after the client pulled out felt unreal, like walking through a place I used to recognize but no longer belonged to. I still came in for a short transition period, not because I owed them anything, but because I wanted closure on my own terms. I documented processes, handed over access, and finished exactly what I had agreed to. Nothing more, nothing less. The shop moved differently without me absorbing the pressure. Problems lingered. Small mistakes stacked. Calls went unanswered longer than they should have. For years, I had been the quiet correction between error and disaster. Without that buffer, everything slowed. No one blamed me directly. They couldn't. Not out loud. But the tension followed me through the building. Paige stopped posting about the shop. The polished confidence faded quickly when there was nothing smooth left to photograph. Meetings with vendors became shorter. Some stopped responding altogether. Relationships I had built over nearly a decade weren't transferable, just because my parents wanted them to be. One afternoon, my father asked if we could talk privately. We stood near the back of the shop, the same place where he used to inspect finished work and tell me what still wasn't good enough. Now his voice was careful. I didn't realize how much you were holding together, he said. I looked at him, really looked. He wasn't angry. He wasn't defensive. He was confused. And for the first time, unsure. That's the problem, I said. You never had to realize. He swallowed. We thought you'd always be here. I nodded. I know. My mother tried a different approach. She invited me over one evening, alone. No Paige. No audience. She made my favorite meal, the one she used to make when I was a kid, and came home exhausted from school and work. For a moment, it almost worked. You could still be part of this, she said gently. Not ownership, maybe, but a role. A good one. I put my fork down. A role without a name. She sighed. You were always reliable. That word again. Reliable meant replaceable. Useful. Silent. I don't want to be reliable anymore. I said, I want to be respected. She didn't answer. A week later, I handed in my final notice. No drama. No raised voices. Just a printed page slid across my father's desk. He read it twice. You're making a mistake, he said quietly. Maybe, I replied, but it's mine. I walked out with a single box. Inside were gloves, notebooks, a few personal tools, and the old watch my grandfather gave me when I first started working there. Everything else I left behind, including the version of myself that believed loyalty meant self-erasure. What surprised me wasn't the fear. It was the calm. I had already lined up independent contracts, not because I chased them, but because people reached out once they realized I was available. The relationships were real, built on trust, not titles. The first invoice, I sent under my own name felt unreal. When the payment hit my account, on time, in full, I sat at my kitchen table and stared at the screen longer than I should have. No delays, no excuses, no promises about later, just value exchanged honestly. The business I built was smaller, quieter, but it was mine. Months passed. The shop changed hands partially. My parents brought in outside consultants. Paige pivoted, rebranded herself again, from vision to lifestyle, from strategy to something less defined. We don't talk much now, not because of anger, because clarity creates distance. I think about the folder sometimes. How close I came to never opening it. How easy it would have been to keep believing that effort eventually turns into recognition. It doesn't. Not in systems designed to benefit from your silence. The truth is, I wasn't betrayed all at once. I was slowly minimized, reduced to function instead of person, and because it happened gradually, I didn't recognize it as exploitation until I saw it written down in someone else's handwriting. That's how it works in families like mine. They don't scream. They don't steal loudly. They just decide your future without you. Walking away didn't make me stronger overnight, but it did something more important. It gave me ownership over my life. I learned that boundaries don't have to be announced to be enforced. Sometimes the most powerful statement is simply stepping out of a role that was never meant to honor you. If you're watching this and you're the one who always stays late, always fixes things quietly, always absorbs the pressure, so others can shine, pay attention. If your value only exists when you're useful, that's not appreciation. That's convenience. And convenience disappears the moment you stop giving it away for free. I don't regret the years I spent there. They taught me skill, resilience, and patience. But I do regret how long I believed that suffering was the price of belonging. Family isn't supposed to cost you your voice. Work isn't supposed to erase your name. And loyalty isn't supposed to make you invisible. The day I stopped trying to earn my place, I finally claimed it. Not at their table, but in my own life.